His sister had 48 hours to live. With nothing but a lockpick and a desperate prayer, Leo walked into the tower of the richest man in the city, knowing failure meant leaving her to die. Welcome to my channel. If you enjoy deep, emotional stories like this, please subscribe and like the video. It truly helps the channel grow. This particular tale is one that stayed with me for a long time. It's the result of days of careful research and reflection, put together to inspire, teach, and encourage us. And if it moves you, don't forget to share, like, and subscribe so more people can experience stories like this. The air in the children's hospital was a specific kind of heavy. It wasn't just the smell of antiseptic and stale flowers. It was the weight of held breaths, of silent prayers whispered in hallway corners, of futures hanging by the thinnest of threads. In a room on the 4th floor, that weight had a name: Chloe. She was small in the big hospital bed, a tangle of blonde hair against the white pillow. Tubes and wires traced delicate paths from her arms to beeping machines, lifelines that were also ticking clocks. Her brother, Leo, sat in the hard plastic chair he'd worn a permanent groove into over the past week. He was 12, but his eyes were older. They were fixed on the slow, steady rise and fall of her chest, as if by sheer will he could keep the rhythm going. His mom was down the hall, having another quiet, tear-filled conversation with a woman from the billing department. The words payment plan and insurance cap floated back to him, each one a stone dropped into the pit of his stomach. The number they needed was a mountain, $1 million. It may as well have been a billion. It was a number from another world, a world of private jets and shiny skyscrapers, not of worn-out sneakers and packed lunches. Leo reached into his pocket, his fingers closing not around money, but around cool, familiar metal. A tension wrench. A hook pick. They were smooth from use. His grandfather's hands had held them last, large and calloused, guiding Leo's small, clumsy fingers. "Listen, Leo," his grandpa would say, his voice a low rumble in their dusty garage workshop. "Every lock has a heartbeat. Every mechanism has a story it wants to tell. Your job isn't to force it. Your job is to be quiet and to listen." They'd practiced on old padlocks and discarded doorknobs. It was a game, a puzzle. But his grandpa's eyes were serious. "This isn't about taking what isn't yours," he'd said, his grip firm on Leo's shoulder. "It's about understanding that barriers are just questions waiting for an answer." His grandpa was gone now, and the biggest barrier Leo had ever faced wasn't made of brass and pins. It was made of paper, with a $sign in front of it. It was a wall standing between his sister and the surgery she needed. The doctor had been kind but firm. Without it, she has maybe a week. The words had turned Leo's world to static. He looked from Chloe's peaceful, sleeping face to the window. 3 blocks away, a skyscraper speared the Los Angeles sky, its glass and steel apex catching the afternoon sun like a beacon. Sterling Tower. The home of Julian Sterling, a name synonymous with ruthless deals and unimaginable wealth. He was a headline, a face on business magazines, a concept. An idea, desperate and terrifying, began to form in Leo's mind. It was less a plan and more a single, magnetic pull. The mountain was in that building. He didn't write a note. He just stood, gently squeezed Chloe's hand, a promise, and walked out. He walked past the nurse's station, past his mom who was leaning against a wall, exhausted, her face in her hands. He walked out of the heavy air and into the brittle, smoggy sunshine. The walk to Sterling Tower was a journey between planets. The quiet, sterile anxiety of the hospital gave way to the roaring, indifferent energy of downtown. His sneakers, worn thin, scuffed the hot pavement. He felt every stare, every glance from suited men and women that took in his old jeans and his tense face. He was a smudge on a high-resolution screen. The lobby of Sterling Tower was a cathedral of wealth. Sunlight poured through vaulted ceilings, gleaming off polished granite floors so clean Leo could see his own anxious reflection. A wall of water flowed silently behind the reception desk. Security guards stood with practiced stillness, their eyes scanning. Leo's heart was a frantic bird in his chest. He approached the main desk, the tools in his pocket feeling suddenly obvious, like they were glowing. "I need to see Julian Sterling," he said, his voice smaller than he wanted. The receptionist, flawless and cool, didn't look up from her screen. "Do you have an appointment?"
No.
"Then I'm afraid that's not possible. You can leave your name and contact information at the security kiosk." Her tone was final, a door clicking shut. This was the first lock. Leo took a shaky breath.
He thought of his grandfather.
"Listen, please," Leo said, and this time his voice broke, letting the raw fear underneath show through. It's about an impossible thing. Tell him I can prove impossible things still happen." The receptionist finally looked at him. She saw a boy, not a threat. She saw the desperation that no child should wield. With a sigh that was more exasperation than pity, she picked up a phone, turned away, and spoke in low tones. Minutes stretched. Leo stood, feeling the guard's eyes on him. Then, a different man in a sharper suit appeared. "Come with me," he said, no warmth in his voice. The elevator was silent and swift, a capsule hurtling toward the clouds. The doors opened directly into the penthouse, an expanse of white marble, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city like a owned diorama. The air was cool, scentless, expensive. In the center of a vast conference room stood a group of men and women, the air around them buzzing with power and impatience. And in the center of them was Julian Sterling. He was taller in person, sharper. His suit was a dark, liquid gray, and his eyes were the color of a winter sky. He was finishing a conversation, a dismissive wave of his hand slicing through the air. His gaze landed on Leo, and a look of amused confusion flickered across his face. "This is the impossible thing?" Sterling asked, his voice smooth, echoing slightly in the spacious room. A few of the executives chuckled, a dry, polite sound.
Leo's mouth was dry.
He nodded. "And what, exactly, is your impossible feat?" Sterling walked closer, his shoes tapping a precise rhythm on the marble. Leo became acutely aware of his own feet, dirty from the streets, bare against the cold, perfect stone. He'd lost a shoe on the frantic walk over and hadn't even noticed. I can open things," Leo managed. "Open things," Sterling repeated, a smile playing on his lips. He glanced at his team, sharing the joke. "Doors? Jar lids? What are we talking about here, kid?" "Locks. Safes." Leo's fingers found the tools in his pocket. The cool metal grounded him. "My grandpa taught me." The room's amusement grew warmer, more genuine. They were enjoying the break in their high-stakes day. A real-life curiosity. Then Sterling's eyes drifted, landing on a feature in the far wall of his office, visible through the open door. A sleek, matte gray panel. A safe. Not an old-fashioned vault, but a modern monster of titanium and algorithmic complexity, built into the very bones of the building. A wicked idea illuminated Sterling's face. It was the look of a man who believed he controlled every variable in every room. "That's safe," Sterling said, pointing. "It's rated to withstand thermite, drills, and digital decryption for 12 hours. The top security system in the world. My personal curiosity." He looked back at Leo, the challenge bright in his eyes.
"You open that."
"Right here, right now. You do the impossible." He let the sentence hang, then delivered the bait and the barb together. "You open it, and I will give you $1 million.
Cash.
Today." A gasp, then more laughter rippled through the executives. It was a ridiculous proposition. A billionaire's whim. "And if I fail?" Leo whispered, already knowing the answer. Sterling's smile widened. It wasn't cruel, but it was devoid of warmth. It was transactional. "Then you admit, in front of all these people, that some barriers are meant to stay shut. That impossible things are just impossible. You walk back out of here with nothing but the lesson." It was a cruel wager. Riches versus utter humiliation. To turn a child's hope into a corporate spectacle. Leo looked past Sterling through the windows, toward the block where the hospital stood. He saw Chloe's face. He heard the beep of her heart monitor, a countdown. He felt the weight of the mountain. He had nothing left. No options. Only this one terrible, shiny chance. He looked Julian Sterling dead in the eye. Okay. The laughter stopped, replaced by a buzz of incredulous interest. Phones were subtly raised. This was going to be a story. Sterling, looking pleasantly surprised, gestured grandly toward his office. The floor is yours. Leo walked from the conference room into the even quieter sanctuary of Sterling's office. The safe dominated the wall. It was cold, impersonal, a tomb of secrets. The executives filtered in, lining the walls, a semicircle of spectators. Julian Sterling leaned against his giant desk, arms crossed, the picture of entertained expectation. Leo stood before the titanium face. The sheer, polished surface showed a distorted reflection of himself, a small, pale boy surrounded by giants. He blocked them out. The noise, the stares, the pressure. He imagined his grandfather's hand on his shoulder. Listen, Leo. He took out his simple tools. They looked absurd against the high-tech interface. A gasp of renewed mockery came from the crowd. But Leo didn't see the safe. He felt it. He placed his palms flat against the cool metal, like feeling a chest for a heartbeat. He closed his eyes. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he wasn't in a billionaire's penthouse. He was in a dusty garage. His sister was laughing in the sunshine. His grandfather's voice was a steady guide. He inserted the tension wrench, applying the faintest of pressure. With the pick, he began to explore, not by sight, but by sound and touch. The pins inside were not obstacles. They were the first notes of a song. He listened for the binding pin, for the subtle click of alignment. The room was utterly silent now. The only sound was the faint, metallic whisper of his pick against the pins. The executives had stopped smiling. They were leaning forward, unconsciously holding their breath. Julian Sterling's amused posture had stiffened. His arms uncrossed. Leo's world had shrunk to the tip of his tool, and the story the lock was telling him. A story of precision, of engineering, of false gates and true gates. He felt for the sheer line, for the tiny, perfect moment of surrender. He worked for minutes that felt like hours. Sweat beaded on his temple. His arm ached. The ghost of his sister's name was on his lips, a silent mantra. Then he felt it. A deep, resonant alignment through the entire mechanism. A harmony. He opened his eyes. He turned the tension wrench. And in the dead silence of the room, a soft, final click echoed like a thunderclap. That sound, that soft, definitive click, hung in the air of the penthouse office, a period at the end of a sentence no one had expected to be written. For a long, breathless moment, nothing happened. The executives were frozen, their faces etched in various stages of disbelief. A few had their phones still raised, recording what they'd assumed would be a comedic failure, now capturing something entirely different. The smug, entertained energy that had filled the room just seconds before had been vacuumed out, replaced by a thick, bewildered silence. Leo's own breath caught. He hadn't allowed himself to think past the click. The $1 million, the surgery, they were abstract concepts, distant stars. The click was the only real thing. He slowly removed his tools, his fingers trembling now that the work was done. All eyes, wide and unblinking, shifted from Leo's small, dirty hands to the face of the safe. Julian Sterling had pushed himself off his desk. The casual, leaning posture was gone, replaced by a rigid, upright stance. The winter-gray eyes were no longer amused. They were sharp, focused, and for the first time, deeply unsettled. This was not in the script. This was an impossibility occurring in the heart of his world, a world he had built on knowing the price and capability of everything. "Open it," Sterling said, his voice quiet but cutting through the silence. It wasn't the grand, performative command from before. It was an order, laced with a tension he couldn't disguise. Leo, his heart hammering against his ribs, reached for the handle. It was cool, heavy. He pulled. The titanium door swung inward on perfectly balanced hinges. It moved with a hushed, expensive sigh. A collective, unconscious lean came from the circle of spectators. They craned their necks, expecting a blinding glimpse of gold bars, stacks of crisp bills, glittering jewels, the tangible proof of Sterling's fortune. But there was no glint, no shine. Instead, there was only shadow, and within it, the dull, soft edges of stacked paper. Not currency. Older paper. Yellowed at the edges. Leo, confused, reached in and pulled out the first sheaf. They were envelopes. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, tied with faded twine. The paper was thick, old-fashioned stationery, and they smelled of dust and time. The top envelope was different. It was slightly less aged, addressed in a shaky, elegant hand to Julian. No title, just Julian. The silence deepened, curdling from bewilderment into profound awkwardness. The executives exchanged glances. This was a private thing, an intimacy they were not meant to see. The spectacle had backfired. Sterling's face had drained of color. All the authority, the polished ruthlessness, had melted away, leaving behind something raw and unguarded. He looked like a man who had been physically struck. He took a slow, unsteady step forward, then another, his expensive shoes silent on the marble. He didn't look at his team. He didn't look at the safe. His eyes were locked on that single envelope in Leo's hand. Wordlessly, Leo held it out. Sterling took it as if it were made of ash, fragile enough to disintegrate at his touch. His hands, which had signed billion-dollar deals, shook slightly. He turned it over. The back flap was sealed with a simple glob of red wax, imprinted with a signet ring, a family crest. It was unbroken. With a faint, ragged breath, Sterling broke the seal. He pulled out a single sheet of paper, the same thick stationery, filled with the same shaky script. He began to read, his eyes scanning the lines. And then, the impossible happened for the second time that hour. Julian Sterling, the untouchable billionaire, brought a hand to his mouth. A choked sound escaped him. His shoulders, always held so square and commanding, slumped. The paper trembled violently in his grasp. And then, a tear, a single, undeniable track of vulnerability, traced a path down his cheek. It was followed by another. He didn't sob, didn't weep openly. He simply stood there in the middle of his empire, silently crumbling under the weight of a few inked words. The room was a tableau of shock. The executives were statues, mortified, unsure whether to look or to vanish. Leo just watched, his own mission momentarily forgotten, overwhelmed by the sight of this giant brought low by a piece of paper. Sterling finally looked up, his gaze swimming, finding Leo. The mocking challenge was gone, replaced by a depth of anguish and awe that was terrifying to behold. "How?" he whispered, the word cracking in the middle. "How did you do this?" Leo's mind was a storm. The safe, the letters, this broken man. But through the storm, one image burned brighter and steadier than all the others. Chloe. Her small hand in his. The beep of the machine. The mountain. He met Sterling's shattered gaze, and with a simplicity that cut through all the complexity of the moment, he gave the only true answer. "Because I had to," Leo said, his own voice small but clear in the absolute quiet. "My sister is dying." The words landed with the force of a physical truth. They connected the strange, mystical act of opening the safe to the brutal, human reality that had driven it. It wasn't magic. It wasn't a trick. It was love, sharpened by desperation into a key. Something shifted in Sterling's face. The anguish didn't disappear, but it was joined by a dawning, furious clarity. The private ghost from the safe collided with the living, breathing child in front of him. The locked-away past met the urgent, bleeding present. He blinked, the tears still wet on his face, but his voice regained a shred of its command, though now it was directed with a new purpose. He turned to his closest aide, who was staring, stupefied. "Michael. The hospital. 3 blocks away. A girl named Chloe. Find her. Find her doctors. Get me the head of the department on the phone now." The orders were rapid, sharp. "Tell them money is no object. Whatever she needs. The best surgeon, the best team, the best everything. Arrange it all.
Now.
Move." The aide, jolted into action, fumbled for his phone, and hurried from the room, the spell of silence broken by the urgent sound of dialing. Sterling then turned his attention back to the safe, to the bundles of letters. He reached in and pulled one out at random, the twine loose. The date on the envelope was from over 20 years prior. He didn't open it, just held it, a profound sadness settling over his features. "My father," he said, not to the room, but almost to himself and to Leo. "We disagreed. About everything. The business, life. He thought I'd lost my soul to the pursuit of money. I thought he was a sentimental fool. The last thing I said to him was that he lived in a world of impossible, childish things." He looked at the open safe. "He had this installed for me when I built this tower. A housewarming gift," he said. "I never opened it. I assumed it was empty. A joke. Or a lesson I was too stubborn to learn." He looked at the letter in his hand, the one Leo had opened. "It says, to be opened when someone proves impossible things still happen." He let out a breath that was half a laugh, half a sob. "He knew I'd never believe it could be opened. He was waiting for you." The full, staggering irony of it settled over the room. The cruel wager, the public test, had been the exact mechanism his father had foreseen. The boy with nothing had come to prove a point about money, and in doing so, had delivered a message about everything money couldn't buy. Sterling looked at Leo, really looked at him, the dirty feet, the old clothes, the eyes that had seen too much worry. "The deal," Sterling said, his voice firming. $1 million. It's yours. It will be transferred immediately." He paused, then made a decision, the kind that changes the trajectory of a life. "But that's just the start. I am matching it. That second million will be the founding grant for the Chloe and Leo Foundation, to cover medical bills for children, for families who are facing that mountain." Leo felt the world tilt. The mountain wasn't just being climbed, it was being moved. He couldn't speak, could only nod, hot tears of relief and shock finally welling in his own eyes. The days that followed were a blur of impossible, wonderful things. Chloe's surgery was performed by the top specialist in the country, flown in that night. It was a success. The weight in the hospital room didn't disappear. The fear leaves slow echoes, but it was replaced by a buoyant, fragile hope. The machines still beeped, but now they sang a song of recovery. Julian Sterling was true to his word. The money arrived, not just as a payment, but as a lifeline that erased a crushing debt. The paperwork for the foundation began, with Sterling's own lawyers working pro bono, insisting the family have full oversight. But the change in Julian Sterling was the most profound unlock of all. He began visiting the hospital, not with fanfare, but quietly. He'd sit with Leo and his mother, not as a billionaire benefactor, but as a man who seemed to be remembering how to be human. He told them, haltingly, about his father. About the letters he was now reading, one by painful, beautiful one, each one a piece of a bridge he'd thought burned forever. He mended other fences, too. Old business partners received calls that were about apology, not acquisition. His public persona softened, his wealth increasingly channeled not into displays of power, but into concrete acts of quiet alleviation. The story could end with a happy ending. The sister saved, the money granted, the billionaire redeemed. But the true ending is quieter, and lingers longer. It lingers in the sterile hallway of a different hospital, months later, where a family hears the words, "Your financial assistance application has been fully approved by the Chloe and Leo Foundation," and the mother's knees buckle not from fear, but from relief. It lingers in a quiet study in a penthouse, where a man no longer young reads a letter from his father that says, "I am proud of the man you are, not the empire you build," and weeps, but this time, the tears are a cleansing rain. And it lingers with a boy, now a little older, who still carries lockpicks in his pocket. He doesn't see barriers the same way anymore. He sees them as his grandfather taught him, as questions. And he knows that the most powerful key in the world isn't made of steel. It's made of the love that makes you desperate enough to try the impossible, and the human connection that turns the attempt into an answer for someone else. 2. The titanium safe in Sterling Tower remains open. It's empty now. Its contents, The weight of regret, the words of love, the catalyst for change, were finally released into the world. It stands as a monument not to impenetrable security, but to a single, transformative truth that sometimes the most locked-away things, a heart, a hope, a second chance, are just waiting for the right person with the right reason to come along and listen for the click.